Okay, welcome to class number 10 on the 10th chapter of Chassidic Approach to Joy, talking about letting go. And I want to start the class tonight with a question and get some feedback. I've been working with veterans now for a number of years and interviewing a lot of veterans. And all of the veterans I speak with, there is a level of pride in having served. And even if they only served for 2 or 3 years, and even if they didn't serve during combat, they served, for example, as a dental assistant in Germany, even then, there was a pride in service. And I want to see if we can pry into that a little bit and ask, what is that? What is that about? Where does that pride in service come from? And I'd like to get your thoughts. And again, this doesn't have to be military service. This can be volunteer service in, Civil Air Patrol or in hospital work or whatever it is. What is that aspect of service that gives a person pride?
That's a tough question.
Well, maybe not.
Pardon me?
I said maybe not. In my particular case, considering where I was born and during what times I was born, and then when I came to the United States and was afforded opportunities that I would have never had in Germany, and although I was not relishing being drafted during the Vietnam War, when I weighed the option, there was for me no going to Canada, there was no turning tail and going back home. I stayed in this country because I appreciated what this country is, what it was, and what it did for me. And so I allowed myself to be drafted, and then I put on my thinking cap during basic training, where I learned to sweat in Fort Knox, Kentucky at the height of the summer. And I re-enlisted right then and there for a full 3-year term in regular Army. That gave me the opportunity to have a word in my MOS, and I got lucky. I had the Army train me in electronics. I became then an electronics instructor in an anti-aircraft missile system, which later on, when I went back to civilian life, stood me in good stead and saved the University of Illinois a boatload of money because I could do a lot of things nobody else would have done, and I had good rapport with our suppliers. So they were happy to work with me and save themselves a trip. But you also form a kinship with your fellow draftees and or colleagues on post, which is what I did, and I learned immeasurably from it. And strangely enough, though, I would like to sum it up in this way: I would not miss this for the world. I would not necessarily want to repeat it. Now, I carried this attitude of service over into the American Legion, where, of course, we exist for the benefit of veterans that the government might throw by the wayside, and we won't have it. And then together with my wife, working with the VA and Salvation Army, again, for homeless and at-risk veterans. So service is just a thing that has become kind of natural.
So talk about that aspect then. What is it about taking an oath and serving?
Yeah. But I took that oath twice.
But my question is, what is it about that gives you a sense of pride and fulfillment?
Well, first of all, I've never considered that oath having an expiration date. And then after I came back out of the Army, I did that same oath twice in spades, once again in spades when I became a citizen. That was considerably time after I came back out of the service. So I think that oath means something. To me, it means a lot because of my background and my history. And I do feel a sense of obligation. Do not take an oath lightly, and I didn't.
So, but I'm prying deeper. I'm prying deeper, and I'm going to ask the others to jump in with your thoughts as we go along to try and flesh this out a little bit, because it's common, not only in veterans, but in volunteer service organizations and in EMS and police, in hospital. There's something about service
Something about doing something for somebody else rather than
Yes.
for ourselves. Being able to do something that's needed and that isn't necessarily something that would be helpful to us, except that we're doing it for somebody else.
Okay. I think we're digging into that now. Bob, you were in the legal field and you also took on supporting others in challenging times and not necessarily the easy or popular cases. So can you talk about what service does for you?
And we're talking about service as opposed to the service.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I see this common thread in people, and I think Judy just said it really well. You're doing something that's needed. Others aren't necessarily doing it. You're not necessarily getting anything out of it other than pay, but there is something we're getting. There's something deeper and stronger than even pay. Because I've been in EMS. There's some things we do, and as a chaplain, there's some things we do. You really can't get paid enough to do that.
So it is what we do not get paid. None of it.
Right. And so the volunteers in Civil Air Patrol, what is that?
In my case, I feel a sense of obligation simply for what this country has afforded me as a kid
Okay.
from Germany coming over here.
Got that. I'm asking now for everyone who does that level of service, what are we getting out of it? What's in it? I hate to say what's in it for us, but there's got to be some motivation that gets us to do some pretty ugly stuff that nobody else wants to do, and we take it on. What is it about that service?
There's all kinds of compensation.
Yeah.
Not necessarily money. Last of all, the compensation is money for that. But I think I can't speak the way Rudy does about where I was born. I was born here. I know that when I was prosecuting, when I was picking juries, I love to get people who were naturalized Americans. They took almost always, they took the role of juror and the obligation, the pride in being an American, which we took for granted because we didn't know anything else. But immigrants took it so seriously.
Yes, we do.
Of where they were born. And
I think
what they
that talks
didn't
to
have.
something else as well.
I'm sorry?
I think what you said talks to something else as well. That there's something that you can do that somebody else can't do.
Well,
And they
I
being
think it's having
grateful
the
for being
opportunity.
able to do it.
I think for an immigrant, as in Rudy's case, and millions like Rudy, getting the opportunity to do things not that somebody else can't do, but that they couldn't do before they came here. America really was this shining beacon. Not so much anymore, although I suppose to the South Americans, to the Latinos, it still is. It's the land of opportunity that they don't have. But in terms of pride, why I don't know why anybody else does the things that they do. I only know in some instances why I do. First, it's all I knew growing up. My parents always taught that we have an obligation, not just as citizens, but we as Jews have an obligation to be an example. Public service, whether as a prosecutor or doing charity work or other pro bono work, Civil Air Patrol, is an opportunity to provide services to people, to protect rights in so many areas. And I feel good about being able to do that.
Right.
Not just having the opportunity to do it, but doing it. But even as, for instance, I may have mentioned this, as a prosecutor, we represented the people of the state of Illinois. And to us, that meant all the people, not just the public at large, but that included the defendant. And it was important to protect the defendant's rights too, because that was the right thing to do. And it gave us an opportunity as prosecutors to I hate to say do it with pride, but to be proud of the positions that we took and the work that we did for the public, because we felt that the public benefited from our attitudes. In Civil Air Patrol, you know, I started because I wanted to fly, and did a lot of that. But my service in Civil Air Patrol gave me an opportunity to make other people or help other people feel good about their service, which I think is important when we talk about compensation. We're just talking about this with somebody. It's not just a matter of awards and commendations. As commanders, we can do that, but it's simply a matter of saying thank you. And people feel good about that, and it gives me great pride to know that, or to find out really, the things that I never even thought about. I just did because that's the way I was brought up. And people 10 or 20 years later will say, you know, you don't remember doing this, but, and it was a little thing to me, but not to them. And it made a difference. And I think the making the difference is just, it gives me great pleasure. I don't know, the pride is the word, but
So I want to take it right from where you just left off there, right? The class is the Chassidic approach to joy. And that's what you just spoke about. It's the joy that we've gone beyond ourselves. We've gone and done something that others might not do, might not have the opportunity to do, but we can, and we step up. And whether we took an oath of office and gave up our rights by joining the military for a greater cause, or stepped into an emergency situation and had the training and the desire to make something better for somebody else in a time that was critical. All of these things, it's when we get outside of ourselves and do something for others. And more, and I was going to say more in the military, but that's not true. Because in every field of service, there is a defined mission. Whether that's the medical Maimonides code of, at least do no harm, or trying to provide relief, or whether it's in the military, or whether it's the legal services or in sciences, to discover and help and figure out something that will bring better life to people. All of these things, that mission above and beyond self gives us purpose. And to be able to do so for unselfish reasons brings joy. It brings great pleasure. And so one of the things we talk about in this chapter, and if you look at the book, it gives an example of the drunk who is happy-go-lucky and he hasn't a care in the world. Well, that's true, but he's also not accomplishing anything, and he doesn't have pride. He just doesn't have a care. And there's a big difference, right? There's a big difference in being careless and free versus actually caring and being productive in a way. So again, going back from the text, many of us are so concerned with who we are and what we have that we never really get to let loose and be happy. Self concerns tie us down and prevent us from experiencing real happy, because we're measuring something about self. But a person like the drunk who has nothing, he has no purpose, he has no goals, but he also has no genuine source of happiness. He may be carefree and consider himself happy, but it is the nature of a human being to want to be productive. It is the nature of the human being to want to be able to be, I'm going to use the word creative, in different formats that can come into. But
there are some notable exceptions.
Pardon?
There are some notable exceptions.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But I think that this is the idea that we're focusing on, is that, we have a brain, we have a soul, we need to feel that we're being productive, we're accomplishing something. And so the Chassidic approach to joy includes what's called Kabbalah's oil. Kabbalah's oil, Kabbalah means it means also handing down a tradition, a Kabbalah tradition, but Kabbalah means acceptance of. Kabbalah's oil means accepting the yoke. Like an animal who's trained to accept a yoke, an animal to accept the burden, right? Accepting the burden, whether it's taking an oath of military service, whether it's taking an oath for legal or medical, whatever that is, when we accept upon ourselves a yoke of responsibility to accomplish something, we are letting go of ourselves. Now, we do so, and we actually get something much greater in return, but that's where that secret of joy comes from, is that joy comes truly from actually being of service to others, being of service to a greater cause. That brings a level of joy. Hasidus says that the greatest joy comes from Kabbalah's oil, Malchus Shemayim, to be accepting the yoke of the heavenly kingdom. When I take an oath that I have a chain of command, or I have a boss, and they may or may not be doing what I feel is right. They, being human, can also have flaws and have, some not good ideas. And so there's that glitch in the system of being able to give up totally, to a greater cause. But Kabbalah's Ol Malchus Shemayim, the acceptance of the yoke of the heavenly kingdom, to be able to give up our self-interests for the sake of whatever it is that God wants us to do, that's the greatest level then of service. And it's the deepest level, because having a godly soul, there is an atonement, attachment to being able to do something godly, not godlike, although that's also true, because by emulating God, we're doing godly things, right? But the idea of being able to give up of ourselves to do something for a divine purpose allows us to be a part of that divine plan. So we now have purpose beyond self, and a purpose which we don't need to second guess, because it's by having Torah and mitzvahs, we have a divine command, a divine guidance of how God wants us to do things. I probably mentioned it before, but there's a book called Min HaMeitzar, From the Depths. And it's a fascinating book. There was a rabbi who was a prisoner in a concentration camp, a Nazi death camp. And Jews would come up and ask the rabbi shilas, questions. What does Jewish law say in such and such a circumstance? Well, we've been doing that for thousands of years. But the questions here were, Rabbi, do I say Shechianu, thanking God for keeping me alive here in a death camp and under the conditions we live under? How can we say Shechianu? Do we, what does God want us to do, right? And how much Mesiras Nefesh, how much do I have to put myself in danger to do a mitzvah? At what, then there was the hardest questions, the most insane questions that were, if 5 people try and escape, 50 Jews will be killed. Can I try to escape knowing that when I'm gone, if I'm successful or not successful, others are going to pay a price for it? Asking the rabbis these questions, what does God want from me, right? And what's more important than the answers to the question is that they cared to ask.
Yeah. They
cared to ask in a death camp under survival conditions. Do I say a blessing Shechianu? Can I steal from the kitchen to provide food for others to survive? Can I steal from the kitchen oil to make a menorah, to light one candle that'll last for 5 minutes, and use cotton torn from a garment to be the wick? Can I do that by stealing the oil? We know that you cannot do a mitzvah through an aver. You cannot do a command through a sin. But the rabbi's answer in this case was, you're not sinning because you're taking from them and they've stolen from everyone else. So taking something from a thief is not considered stealing. But more important than the question, than the answers, was the fact that they cared to ask the question, what is God's will in this circumstance? And that commitment to a divine plan, that commitment to there is a divine mission, is a commitment that goes beyond myself. It's not about me. It's about the mission that God has tasked us with, to make a better world, to make God's garden here blossom into what it truly can be, and not leave it to go sour. So when we let go of our self-consciousness and we let go of our own self-aggrandizement, our own self-concerns, period. When we let go of that and ask the question, what's the divine mission? What does God want from me? And then we dedicate ourselves to that. That's where the real joy is, because it's in that connecting with something which is transcendent from our human life, our transcendent from our human frailties. When we've asked that question, then we've transcended ourselves. We've become connected to our godly soul, that godly part within us. So it's transcendence of the ego, transcendence of self, and connecting with the godly part that is within us, and truly live that godly piece, to live that out. That's where the real joy comes from. That's where the depth of joy comes from, because then you can be joyful and happy and trust in God and be great. You know, Judy had mentioned the gratitude for the opportunity, right? And Rudy, you'd said not only the gratitude, but the obligation, right? So we have an obligation to serve God. We have the gratitude for the opportunity. We've been given the opportunity to serve, that we have that opportunity. Yeah, you know, there was someone who had commented about Civil Air Patrol, that they were a bunch of wannabes. And I laughed and I said, you know, you're 100% correct. He meant it as an insult. I said, no, you're 100% correct, because
Yeah.
Civil
No,
Air
no,
Patrol
no,
was
yeah.
founded. Civil Air Patrol was founded by the people who couldn't get into military service,
There you go.
but refused to stand by and do nothing. They were committed to serving, and if they can't do it through military, they'd find another way. And one of my favorite examples, you guys, Ellie, you're a little bit young, but the rest of you remember the original Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland.
Yeah.
And you remember the Munchkins, right? And at some point in the show, the Munchkin coroner comes up and he tells everybody, the Wicked Witch is dead. She's most certainly dead. That actor was one of our pilots.
Huh.
He
Well,
couldn't
something
serve in the
today.
military because he couldn't serve in the military because he was too small.
Yeah.
And uniforms and all the other stuff, but he was determined to serve, and he did. He was a pilot on the East Coast helping protect submarine patrols.
Awesome.
Anti-Nazi submarine patrols.
Yes.
So, yes, Civil Air Patrol was founded by a bunch of wannabes. They were committed to service above self and service to the country, and if the military wouldn't take them, they're still going to find a way to do it, right? The joy that comes from service above self is part of what every person who serves in any branch of military or law or emergency services, fire, police, the joy of being a part of something greater than self. And even when it's not pleasant, to do so is because we're doing something greater than self. And that gives us tremendous good feeling, gives us a true joy, and a good type of pride, and a gratitude for the opportunity to be of service. That is where the Chassidic approach to joy is really coming, is that we have that opportunity to step into that role and be of service in a greater way, and to be able to do that for God. So I had a conversation today. I had a soldier who called today for some counseling. And one of his questions was about, and I'm being generic enough that I'm not, divulging any personal stuff, but the question was, he's becoming religious and he wants to have more religious observance. How much does he push back on the system to be able to do so? He's applied for a waiver to wear a beard. It's been almost 90 days. Nothing back yet. At what point, what does he do? What point do we? And so we had a whole conversation about don't lose don't win the battle and lose the war. Don't lose sight of the bigger picture. There are times when you have to. There are some times when, for religious freedoms, we have to make a big stink about it and literally make a federal case about it, literally, right? But there are some times when that's counterproductive. At this point, his particular question was about the beard waiver. At this point, he's in the Army. The Army is already into that idea. They're already giving those waivers. It's not a yes or no. It's a yes. We just have to get the paperwork done. It's not worth making a stink right now. Give it time. You're young. You've got time. Take it, just take your time with it, right? Now, had it been 3 years ago and he'd been in the Navy, we did make a federal case about it. Yes, we took it to court and we won. And yes, we made us think about it because the Navy is the last to get on board here. And right now, the Marine Corps is still in legal battle about this. So, but there's a time to fight it, and there's a time to have patience. It will work. And knowing when to do that, right? But what are the guiding principles? That was his real question, was what are the guiding principles to this? And I think the guiding principles are, again, to be of service beyond self, to do that with integrity, to do that with consistency, will bring you not only joy and pride, but it will also garner respect from others.
Can I raise a point?
I'd be disappointed if you didn't, sir.
This, be nice.
It's hard.
Now, this is off subject a little. I'm sure all of you know of Admiral Hyman Rickover.
Yeah.
Okay. Ellie, do you know who he is?
Let's give a quick review.
I don't know if he can hear me.
Ellie, are you hearing? Eliron, yes, got it.
Okay. Do you know who Hyman Rickover was? No. He is the father of the nuclear navy. He is the one who gave nuclear power, who was the engineer, Navy man, who's responsible for the Navy using nuclear power anywhere on its vessels. The USS Nautilus was the first nuclear sub, and he's responsible for it. In spite of the brass, it was a tough fight. Rickover was finally made an admiral. And the reason I say finally is because his promotion to admiral was held up for years because he was Jewish. Finally, it was overcome. And he was finally made an admiral. He's a Chicagoan, if anybody cares about that. The reason that I brought it up is because in 2 weeks, a new nuclear sub will be commissioned, and it is the USS Hyman G. Rickover. And the fact that Rickover was Jewish is prominently mentioned in the publicity. And I just thought, given this audience, I would bring that up. I'm proud to be on a part of the commissioning committee of that. And I can't go to the commissioning, unfortunately. I would have loved to, but it's really a proud moment for the country and for us.
Yeah.
And the contribution of Hyman Rickover.
And on topic, that what he did in the time that he did it was a service beyond self, because he wasn't getting the recognition. He was fighting a tough battle, and he was doing with his hands tied back because of anti-Semitism at the time. And yet he was pushing because he knew that it would be for the betterment of the country and for freedom, period, across the world. And so, here it definitely is an example of how do you persevere through tough things like that. Part of that comes from that, I'm going to use the word joy and pride, but it comes from that good place of knowing what you're doing is the right thing, and it's not about self. And when you're doing the right thing beyond self, it gives you an inner strength and an inner joy to be able to break through the boundaries. We have in Chassidus, we talk about Simcha Peretz Geder, that joy breaks all boundaries. When you are happy about what you're doing, I don't mean happy, go and dance a jig happy, but that you know that what you're doing is of value and it's good and it's worthwhile and you're pursuing it with gusto, you can break through all boundaries. Joy breaks through the boundaries. But that joy comes from a place of service beyond self, a place of certainty that only God can give. And therefore, when we talk about the Chassidic approach to joy, it's the joy that comes from being bearing the Ol Malchus Shemayim, the yoke of the heavenly kingdom, to carry the responsibility of being not only a good Jew, a proud Jew, a contributing Jew, someone who's making the world a better place, and that's the divine mission. From the Torah, we are very clear that our point is to make a dir b'tachtonim, a dwelling place for God in the lower world, down here in the physical world, to make the world a better place, a kinder place, where goodness and godliness is revealed in our actions. And in conversations with SEER instructors, survival, evasion, resistance, escape, one of the things they talk about is to get through the worst of times, the most difficult challenges that no one should ever have to face. You can't rely, sadly enough, that your country will do everything for their power to save you. No, they have to take the country's needs ahead of the individual needs. You can't count on family, because at the end of the day, spouses may have to move on with the assumption you're not there anymore, you're dead, right? And family has to move on, and parents have to grieve and may pass away. I mean, all these things that an isolated person might hold on to, they're temporal. They may not be there. Part of the SEER instructor's responsibilities is to share that you need to find a purpose beyond all of that to get you through. You have to touch the divine to get through those things. And the flip side of that is, when I'm speaking with veterans regarding suicide prevention and things, one of the things I talk about is the fact that you exist means you're part of God's divine mission. You are mission critical. There's something you have to contribute to the world that nobody else can do. And you may go through hard times to learn the lessons you need to be able to share with others, but you're mission critical. You are needed. You are desperately needed. And so stick around. We need you, right? So it's that touching the godly soul within, the godly mission that we're given to make the world a better place. That's what brings the joy. Setting self aside, serving a greater cause, serving a divine cause, an infinite cause. And that's where that deepest joy comes from. And then with that, you can face anything, absolutely anything. And I think the greatest example of where that has been time tested is that the Chabad movement. There's a running joke that the Chabad's international headquarters and primary synagogue is in a basement in Brooklyn. We have been an underground movement for hundreds of years. But the Chabad movement began under the Tsarist regime and continued throughout the Soviet regime. There was a joke back in the 80s that Chabad is everywhere Coca-Cola is, except Coke isn't in Russia and Chabad is. But this Chassidic joy of service helped Chabad survive the Tsarist regimes, the communist regimes, the most anti-religion of any kind regimes, and yet stick it out and never give in. And yes, thousands were killed and died because of it. And yet, here we are. All those things dissipate. I think Mark Twain said it very nicely in his Harper's Monthly Journal article of December, I want to say 39. Or was it 59? I forget, 59. No, what was it? Anyway, Mark Twain's article of concerning the Jews, and he says, what is the immortality? What is the secret of the immortality of the Jew, right? And he says it talks about the humility and the service, but we know it's that divine godly spark that a Jew will serve. The godly soul within cannot sit back, and we will find a way to contribute. Whether the person is religious or not doesn't matter. It is the very essential godly divine soul of the Jew that he will contribute to the world becoming a better place. He'll do that in the field of religion or science or medicine or legality, doesn't matter. He can't not make that contribution. It's a part of the essence of who he truly is. And that's where the Chassidic approach of joy is, that is being true and honest with that godly essence and taking on that yoke of heavenly mission and to be able to serve beyond self. That's the essence of the whole thing. And throughout the class, we've been talking about different aspects of this and understanding joy, what joy is, and what depression is, and what the sources of those are, and building those pieces up. But the core of the whole thing, it comes down to being in touch with our divine mission to make the world a better place, to be able to put selfish cause needs and things like that, to be able to do that service. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, was imprisoned in Soviet Russia, and one of the guards was trying to make him give names of accomplices, people that were in that underground Jewish network providing Jewish survival. And he threatened him with a gun and said, this gun has made many a man talk. And the Frierdiker Rebbe's response was, that toy can only frighten a person who has only one world and many gods. But for someone who has one God and multiple worlds, means nothing. Being committed beyond self to the divine mission of making this a better place. That's the divine mission. Thoughts? End of session. What? Now the rabbi stops talking and says, okay, come on. What do you walk away with tonight?
Well, I'm glad I tuned into the right 30 minutes of this class. Got it all in a nutshell.
Yeah.
We had some other good discussions. You can go back to
I know, I'm joking. Come on.
I know.
Well, let me turn it around to where we started tonight then. You asked about people's motivation for service. Would you agree, or do you feel that motivation for service goes beyond Jews?
Absolutely.
That the desire to be committed and have a purpose beyond oneself is not necessarily uniquely Jewish.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the proof of the pudding is that all mankind was created in the image of God. And God at the essence is giving. I mean, why did he create the world? He gave. He gave of himself to create, something else, right? So that's the core of humanity, is to be giving. The distinction comes in that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the founders of the Jewish nation, they took it to a whole different level of selfless service that was beyond. Now, I give an example. When I was growing up, Sister Teresa later became Mother Teresa, was a huge figure in the world of selfless service. You know, taking on the most unforgiving jobs and getting out there and doing it, and then going way out of her own nature to raise the funding and political awareness for the cause. You can't say that that woman was not a godly force, right? But in her faith group, there's a reward for that. There's a place in heaven for that, right? And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob set a standard for the Jewish people. Was that doesn't even matter. The heavenly reward is also not the point. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidus, there's a Yiddish quote that basically says, I don't want your heaven, your Gan Eden, your Garden of Eden. I don't want your heavenly reward. I just want to be part of you, nullified to you. I just want to be of service to you, right? And so that's the unique contribution in the Jewish world, is not only to do that because it's the right thing and because it feels good and because it's the godly thing, you'll get a godly reward. It's to the point of complete nullification, literally to die for. You know, have others done so? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, in the military, we look at all the guys who, you know, received the Medal of Honor, and every one of them will just say, well, I was just doing my job.
Yeah.
No, we just went through all of the legal process to prove that you went above and beyond, and we have enough years of gathering data to prove that legally that you went above and beyond, and yet you're still walking away saying, I'm just doing my job. It's beautiful. It's humility. And it is definitely the act of service. And yes, at great personal risk as well. So absolutely. That's a part of a human trait.
Yeah, I think to me that when you first asked the question about why we got reward for service, or we got good about service, that's what came to me. Is just, it's a human trait. I think I can only speak for myself. I don't know. That's why I said maybe it's uniquely Jewish. I don't know, but I think it's pretty widely common that being part of a bigger purpose and having meaning in life and contributing to a greater good is an element of human nature. By the way, if I could, and I'm reluctant to do this, but I will anyhow. I heard an interview this morning about a book that I ordered, which you may find interesting. I don't know if you will or not, because I haven't gotten the book yet and I haven't ordered it yet, but I'll get it and read it and tell you about it. Which is by Arthur Brooks and Oprah Winfrey, and it's about the human dimensions of why humans have these kind of, or how humans have these kind of innate characteristics. I'll leave it at that because I haven't read the book yet. But it sounds like it might be something very much aligned with the class, and I'll give you a book report at some point. Which reminds me also, I never did, and it's not surprising that I never did get a book for this class. I never ordered a book for this class. So is there a way to get the book for the class?
Yeah. So the email I sent out tonight with the link should have a link. It should have it embedded.
It does.
Yeah. So the PDF. Yeah, it's in the PDF.
Okay.
Well,
I'll look into that.
Ellie Ron was just posting in the chat group, build the life you want. Ellie, you want to talk about it?
Have you yet?
Let's say, is that the book?
I think it is. I was just looking at it on Amazon. I just ordered it. Yeah,
That's
Build
good.
the Life You Want, Arthur Brooks and Oprah Winfrey.
There you go.
Have you seen it, Ellie? Or did you
I
just look
have.
it up?
I have.
What do you think about it?
I haven't read the book, but people say it is a nice book on explaining some of their background information on why they believe the way they do.
Thanks for that endorsement. I was curious about it, ordered it. Now, See how it goes.
And
Let me,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna change the subject.
So I just, you know what, I'm going to turn off the recordings.